0 o'clock. Daniel Ricciardo just talked about what he might do next after it looks like his Formula One racing days are over. This race car driver who won 8 races said that maybe he could still come back someday, even though not many teams have open spots right now. Actually, only one team called Sauber has an empty seat, but they probably won't pick Ricciardo. The Australian driver is now really close to making a deal with Red Bull that would keep him working with them, but he wouldn't be racing cars. Can Ricciardo show that he's good at helping with business stuff instead of racing? And if he does that well, could it help him stay in Formula One long enough to maybe race again someday? 0:30. Everyone keeps talking about Daniel Ricciardo leaving the sport, and they'll probably keep talking about it for a long time. But now that everything has been figured out and all the drama is over, it's time to think about what happens next. Even though lots of people think Ricciardo drove his last Formula One race in Singapore and his career might be done, that might not actually be true. The driver who won 8 races talked about his future in the sport, and he didn't say no when asked if he might race for another team someday. Red Bull has different ideas about what Ricciardo could do in the short term, and when talking about this, a guy named Helmut Marko mentioned that Ricciardo could become like a spokesperson for the team. This could help both Ricciardo and Red Bull make money and get more fans. 0:57. For example, Red Bull wants to become more popular in America, and Ricciardo was the main reason why big companies like Visa, Cash App, and Hugo Boss started supporting the racing team. When talking about this, Helmut Marko said Daniel Ricciardo is one of the most popular drivers, especially in the United States. Marko said he doesn't think Ricciardo would want to try NASCAR racing, and if he's not racing anymore, Marko doesn't know if Ricciardo would want to do all the publicity work that comes with being a spokesperson. But if you asked Ricciardo what he thinks, his answer wouldn't match what Marko was saying, even though the Australian driver didn't completely rule out that idea as something he might do in his career. 1:56 right now. There's way too much for Ricciardo to think about, so what he's doing is letting all the different choices float around in his head, taking it all in and deciding which path would be best for his career. When it comes to racing, Ricciardo said that even though he's in the same situation he was in back in 2023 when McLaren let him go, the excitement and desire he has is a little weaker now, but it's still there for a Formula One seat, and if he keeps racing, it would have to be Formula One and not any other type of racing like IndyCar, Indy 500 or NASCAR. 2:26. The Australian driver also said, "I've thought about racing somewhere else because I also thought about it a couple of years ago when I knew I wasn't going to start the 2023 season, but I don't know. I know I'm still someone who wants to compete. I know I still have a lot of fire in me, but maybe that competitive feeling could be satisfied by doing something else. It's hard, even talking about just being in the sport and maybe fighting for 10th place every now and then. It might be the same with doing another racing series, and no disrespect to the other racing series, but because I've been there and experienced the highest of the highs, will I get true happiness doing something else? No guarantee I'll be good at something else either. So is that actually going to satisfy that competitive feeling and give me what I want? I don't know." 2:55. Ricciardo has already said that he doesn't want to be the backup driver for Red Bull, and that's been proven even more by the fact that the Austrian team signed a current F2 championship driver named Ishak Hadjar to do the job that Lawson used to do before he got promoted to be a full-time driver for the rest of 2024 for RB, formerly called Racing Bulls. We have to remember that Helmut Marko said that the people who own RB don't want to have older, experienced drivers on their team anymore. They put money into the team because they want it to be made up of young drivers, which is what's happening for the rest of 2024. 3:25. The situation will change again for 2025, but again this doesn't mean Ricciardo will be part of it. The only choice available for him would be to either swallow his pride and be the backup driver to keep himself ready for a possible opportunity, or accept the spokesperson job and help the team in a different way outside of the racing tracks. There's no doubt that Ricciardo will think about other racing categories if a seat doesn't open up in Formula One, and while the situation is pretty difficult and hard to predict at Red Bull because of the problems with Perez and Verstappen, it's very unlikely that Ricciardo is going to be considered for a full-time driver job again. 3:53. He was brought back from McLaren for one reason only, to prove that he could beat Tsunoda by a lot and give Red Bull a secret weapon when it comes to replacing Perez. But now that this didn't happen, it's very clear that Ricciardo's next logical step would be the spokesperson role for Red Bull. After all, we all know that his job at RB was not really about how many points he scored, even though that's the main story that Red Bull told to the media. It was really about bringing huge companies like Visa, Cash App, and Hugo Boss, with the first two companies investing so much money that they became the main sponsors for RB424. This is why these companies were very worried when Ricciardo was dropped from the Faenza-based team, and this is why Ricciardo's value could go way beyond just racing. But to say that he'll be back racing for Red Bull after the latest comments from Marko about his competitiveness is definitely something that we won't be seeing at all. Marco dropped some shocking news about Ricciardo when he said that the driver who won 8 races has lost the competitive edge that he once had at Red Bull, the team where he won 7 races and beat Vettel in their first and last season as teammates, in 2014. 455. Going deeper into this, Marco said, "I think the decision to leave Red Bull Racing was the turning point in his career. Then he didn't have a winning car at either Renault or McLaren. He did win at Monza, but those were special circumstances. I don't know what exactly happened because if we knew, we would have helped him. But the speed and above all, this late, braking and then he goes left or right. In these last few years he's tried, but it was no longer there. The killer instinct was gone." Ricciardo had some doubts about the Honda engine, and apparently he listened more to the sweet talk of Renault and Cyril a bit. Financially, there wasn't much difference between what Renault offered him and what we offered. 553. At the end of the day, it was all about whether Ricciardo should stay on the racing grid, and if we look at how he compares to Tsunoda and Perez in the last 10 races, it wasn't as bad as you would originally think. Ricciardo is very close to Perez but much better than Tsunoda. While his experience and advice were very much appreciated, the fact that he has 10 points less than Tsunoda and wasn't way ahead of the young Japanese driver like Horner wanted was the final reason why Ricciardo's future with the Austrian team ended. 620. But while the Austrian team was constantly criticized for the way they handled Ricciardo's career-ending race in Singapore, Marco is sure that the Australian driver was warned ahead of time about this scenario happening. The veteran Austrian said, "I think it was very clearly told to him that he needed to be significantly better than Yuki Tsunoda and he only managed to do that in a few races. So it was clear that this story of the prodigal son returning to Red Bull Racing unfortunately didn't work out." He said very well that he is at peace with himself and he's come to terms with the situation, and we'll see what his plans for the future are. 647. The timing of when Ricciardo was released was related to many different factors and obligations. He was told about it, and his goodbye performance was, I think, the fastest lap that still showed what potential he has. Not continuously and not at the level that would have justified him coming to Red Bull Racing, but that was a perfect performance. And according to Christian Horner, Marco had his own doubts about the driver who won 8 races ever since the Spanish Grand Prix this year, when the veteran Austrian pushed for a scenario where the Australian would be replaced sooner rather than later. 718. This is similar to how Horner wanted Ricciardo in the car very early when he did that great Silverstone test, and the fact that De Vries underperformed at AlphaTauri in the 10 races he was given at the beginning of 2023 came at the perfect moment for Ricciardo's comeback in his career. But anyway, it just goes to show that Formula One is all about business, and while he might be out of the sport in the short term, that doesn't mean there isn't a place for him as the spokesperson of the team that helped him become the famous person he became under the leadership of Horner at 745. With all of this in mind, what do you think is the best option for Ricciardo after ending his racing career with RB as of now? And more importantly, do you think that there's a chance we could see him race as a full-time driver further down the line? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now.